Hi guys, this is Julie from Connecting Japan. Welcome back. It's great to see you guys in 2020. This time we're going to do some cultural videos. And this one is going to be about what separates Japan from the rest of Asia. So let's just jump right into it. Politeness level. Now, obviously we've spoken about previously that Japanese people are extremely polite, and they have a highly polite language that you use strictly for the business world. Obviously for the reasons of respecting their senior person, respecting other companies and the people who work in them. And you won't see that anywhere else in the world, just in Japan. Now, obviously, the other things that they do is their traditions in working with different companies, whether it's in the boardroom, in the restaurant, traveling in a car or an elevator, are all well organized based on the politeness levels that they have. The other things you'll see the Japanese do that you will probably see to some lesser degree in other parts of the Asia is the head bow and the body bow. Now, the body bows obviously depend on whether they're saying thank you, apologizing, or just basic greetings for different situations. In other parts of Asia, of course, the Y or the hand clasp is also more preferred, and a version of the head bow as well. But that's based on the rank of the person and their relationship based on their age and generation as well. So that's just a very big difference that you'll see there. When you go traveling in most parts of Asia, the crowds are often a big problem, and that may be whether they're lining up or whether that's something that's going on. You won't see that in Japan. Obviously, they're legendary lining up and queuing, and the way they treat and respect each other is a lot differently. So just bearing in mind to have a little bit of patience if you're going around any parts of Asia where the crowds are a big thing. Obviously pushing in is not a thing. Maybe in one country it might be acceptable, but for the most part, just be patient and you'll get there. Point number 2, transportation. Now, apart from the wealthier countries like Singapore and Hong Kong, most Asian cities have a cheaper version of transport, whether they're tuk-tuks, jeepneys, or whatever version that they call them, or down to the rickshaws and trishaws in other parts of Asia. These are fairly cheap versions, and obviously they all have taxis. The only thing you'll find that might be a bit of an issue is finding a taxi that will take you for a shorter distance. Most taxis generally won't, and they might not even be a little happy about it as well, and they may actually just politely tell you, no, we don't do that. Unless you can negotiate and give them more money, they generally just won't do that. If you're going to Japan, of course, you've got the trains that we talked about before in our traveling in Japan video. The taxis there are very expensive, and they're usually used for businessmen or people who are rushing to get somewhere in a hurry. Why people might balk at the price that they might have to pay. If you've seen any pictures, you'll know that they're very clean, and they're all the doors are all automated, and you're paying for your buck. Okay, so the next one is number 3 is cleanliness. Now, obviously, Japan's one of the cleanest places. Singapore is also another one that's very clean. The reason why Japan is so clean is the civic ordinance fee that all residents, regardless of whether they're Japanese or foreigners, have to pay. And that's probably one of the reasons also that they're also encouraged not to leave rubbish anywhere, and there are no bins. So foreigners probably will be searching around forever finding a bin. You'll probably see them inside of some convenience stores, but not always the case. So it's encouraged for you to take your rubbish home with you. And again, this is something that probably we're going to see a lot more in Australia as well. If you're going to other parts of Asia, then you will probably find they're not nearly as clean. You might find some bins around. just be aware of that fact, and if not, just make sure you take your rubbish away with you. When it comes to eating food in parts of Asia, people might be game enough to try the street food, but you'll find that they generally don't have cleaning facilities. And it's generally encouraged that no matter where you are in Asia, it's generally best not to try the street food unless you're sure you'll have someone with you who can vouch that the food's okay. Make sure you take your baby wipes with you when you go, and obviously bottled water is a thing because you can't drink the drinking water in most Asian countries. But obviously in Japan you can. Number 4, toilets. Now, while we expect to see Western toilets for the most part in your airports, your restaurants, and in your tourist spots and hotels, of course, as well, don't expect to see them everywhere, because you'll have what's called the squat toilets based on the squatting position that you have. And again, these do not have flushing facilities, so wipes are a must. And you have to be careful of the fact that there's no hand towels anywhere. For most Asian countries, hand towels are not a thing. So even if you go to Japan, you'll find that's the exact same thing over there. In Japan, of course, they have the technological versions of our toilets, but if you're going to shrine or ancient areas in Japan, you will find their version of squat toilet. Their squat toilets are a lot different from the ones you'll see in most Asian places, where they're either lifted off the ground. Japanese ones are recessed into the ground, and you need to take sort of like a skiing position. The only difference is they have full flush facilities and toilet paper, where the other Asian toilets do not. And we'll leave a link to the Asian guide for squat toilets, the Japanese version, in the box on the end of this video. Okay, so the next one we're looking at is 5 cash versus credit cards. So while we live in a cash-free society for pretty much, credit card machines are found in most parts of Asia, so that's great. Is that the case everywhere? Not always. And just be aware that some of these may charge you interest fees that are quite exorbitant later on. The most important thing in Japan, of course, they are a cash-dependent society, so it's complete reverse. And any ATMs that are related to their banks are actually closed at 8 p.m. The ones at the convenience stores may incur interest fees, as we mentioned before, and the important thing to remember if you're going throughout Asia is make sure you have a balance of cash and a currency card rather than your credit card. So it's probably best to leave those credit cards behind and keep a whole lot of cash on you when you're in Japan. The average amount of cash that they keep is about $500 in Japan. Sounds expensive, but they do spend quite a bit. Number 6, internet and Wi-Fi. South Korea, Japan, Singapore and Hong Kong have probably got the fastest internet in Asia. But if you're going anywhere else in Asia, you're in for a bit of a shock, and it will be slow unless your hotel has well and truly equipped what you need. So if you don't have any of that, it's important to have a reliable backup. Most airports do provide pocket Wi-Fis that you can purchase as well, or just wait till you get to a Starbucks. Number 7, safety. Now, if you've read anything in the reports about travelling throughout Asia, you will find that most cities are fairly crazy, and sometimes it seems like all travel rules are suspended. In most cases in some of these countries where they're struggling to get from one point to another, you'll find that as the case. So if you're planning to drive, have an international license and good insurance. If you're planning to use a car or a motorbike or whatever the case may be. Most traffic lights in Asia are actually red and green, and they have a countdown as to when you can move, such as the case we saw in Bangkok, for instance. But if you go to Japan, of course, they have red, yellow, and a turquoise colour. And that might be a bit confusing for people who are not aware of it. If you can, it's probably best to do a bit of research to find out how to travel properly in Japan. Japan drivers actually drive on the left, such as we do, but their cars actually have left-hand driving, and that sort of comes about from the American influence that they have had on Japan itself. That's just some of the basic things that you need to know, and I hope that this has given you a little bit of a difference as to why Japan and Asia are a little bit different. I hope that has encouraged you guys to travel around, and we'll let you know more details about what we're doing, and we'll probably send an update very soon. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you soon. Ciao, Martine.